It was a bright Monday morning, the kind that made the air smell fresh after a night of light rain. The hallways of Greenfield Elementary were filled with the sounds of chatter and the squeak of sneakers on the floor. Children rushed to their classrooms with their backpacks bouncing against their backs. In one of those classrooms sat a quiet girl near the second row, her hands folded neatly on her desk. She was one of those students who rarely caused trouble. Always early, always prepared. Her notebooks were clean, her pencils sharpened, and she loved reading stories more than anything. Her hair was her pride and joy, long dark braids that her mother spent hours weaving every Sunday night. Her mother would sing softly while braiding, sometimes humming the same tune she had learned from her grandmother. Each braid was done with care, neatly tied with small colorful beads at the ends that clicked softly when she moved. That morning the girl was excited because they had art class. She had drawn something special, a picture of her family sitting under a tree smiling together. She planned to show it to her teacher after class, hoping she might hang it on the wall with the other drawings. But she didn't know that today would be nothing like other days. Her teacher walked in a few minutes later. She was a woman who liked things in strict order. Desks perfectly aligned, silence when she spoke, and neatness above all. Her clothes were always pressed, her hair tied in a tight bun, and her voice carried an authority that made most students nervous. The girl respected her but was often afraid to speak up around her. As the morning lessons began, everything seemed normal. The students read from their books, answered questions, and copied notes. Then as the teacher moved around the classroom checking on work, she paused behind the girl's desk. "What is that noise?" the teacher said sharply. The girl looked up, startled. "Noise, ma'am?" she asked softly. "That clicking sound," the teacher replied, frowning. "It's been distracting me all morning." The girl froze. She realized it was the sound of the beads at the ends of her braids brushing against her desk. "I'm sorry," she said, quickly pulling her braids forward so they wouldn't touch the table. The teacher sighed and walked away, muttering something under her breath. The girl felt embarrassed. Some classmates looked at her, while others avoided eye contact. She wanted to disappear into her chair. A few minutes passed and everyone returned to their work. But then, during group reading time, one of the beads clicked again when the girl turned her head. It was a small, harmless sound, but the teacher spun around as if it were the loudest thing in the room. "That's enough," she said sharply, walking toward the girl's desk. The entire class went silent. The girl's heart began to race. "I told you that noise is distracting," the teacher continued. "Didn't I?" "Yes, ma'am," the girl whispered. The teacher looked down at her hair with a disapproving glare. "This is exactly what I mean," she said. "All these beads and braids. They don't belong in a classroom. How are you supposed to learn when your hair makes such a fuss?" A few kids giggled quietly, trying not to be noticed. The girl's cheeks burned. She wanted to explain that her mother braided her hair like this every week, that it was neat and clean, that she loved it, but her throat felt tight. The teacher turned to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small pair of scissors, the kind used for cutting paper in art projects. She held them up, shaking her head. "Let's fix this distraction," she said, her tone sharp and impatient. The girl's eyes widened. "No, please," she said softly, holding her braids with both hands. But before she could react, the teacher reached forward and snipped one of the braids right above the bead. The sound of the scissors echoed in the silent room. The braid fell to the floor, beads scattering across the tiles. For a second, no one moved. The girl stared at her desk in disbelief. Her hands trembled. Tears filled her eyes, but she couldn't make a sound. The rest of the class looked horrified. Some kids covered their mouths, others stared down at their books. "There," the teacher said, as if she had done something reasonable. "Now we can focus on learning." The girl couldn't move. Her mind went blank. She could feel the uneven weight of her hair, the missing braid like a hole in her chest. Slowly, tears rolled down her cheeks. "Go to the nurse's office and wash your face," the teacher said coldly. "You'll be fine." The girl stood up shakily, her knees weak. As she walked past her classmates, she could feel their eyes following her. No one said a word. The cut braid still lay on the floor. She left it there. In the hallway, she wiped her face with her sleeve, but the tears kept coming. The long walk to the nurse's office felt endless. When she arrived, the nurse looked up in surprise. "Sweetheart, what happened?" The girl didn't answer. She just sat on the small bed in the corner, clutching the edge of her desk with her good hand. The nurse noticed the uneven ends of her hair, the missing braid and the beads scattered in her pocket. Slowly, she put the pieces together. Within a few minutes, the principal was called. He entered the nurse's office, trying to sound calm. "Let's not make this a big deal," he said softly. "Maybe the teacher didn't mean any harm. We'll talk to her." The nurse frowned but said nothing. She gave the girl a glass of water and gently brushed her shoulder. "You rest here for a while, okay?" That afternoon, the girl was sent home early. She walked slowly through the gate, holding her backpack close. Her father was waiting by the door when she came in. He looked up, surprised to see her home before time. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, smiling at first. "You okay?" She didn't answer. She took off her backpack, placed it on the floor, and stood silently. Her father noticed her uneven hair immediately. He knelt down, confusion spreading across his face. "What happened to your hair?" That's when she finally broke down. The tears she had been holding back came rushing out. She told him everything. How the teacher had yelled at her, how she cut her braid in front of everyone, how everyone just watched. Her father's face changed slowly as he listened. Shock, then disbelief, then anger. But he didn't raise his voice. He just wrapped his arms around her and said softly, "You did nothing wrong." Her mother came in from the kitchen, hearing the commotion. When she saw her daughter crying and her hair uneven, her hand went to her mouth. She sat beside them, hugging her child tightly. That evening, the father sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cut braid that his daughter had brought home in a small plastic bag. He couldn't believe that someone at her school, a teacher no less, had done such a thing. He wanted to storm back there immediately, but he knew he needed to stay calm. He asked his daughter to tell him everything again, carefully, step by step. She did. Each word hurt him more than the last. "I'm going to make this right," he said finally. His voice was low, but his eyes were full of determination. The girl looked up at him, her face still wet with tears. "Will they believe you?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "They'll have to." That night he made a few phone calls. One to the school board office, another to a friend who worked in local administration, and a third to a small community group that handled discrimination complaints. Each person he spoke to reacted with disbelief and concern. Meanwhile, the girl's mother sat with her on the couch, gently undoing the rest of the braids. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the television. Her mother's hands moved slowly, carefully, as if trying not to hurt her. "I don't want to go back there," the girl whispered. Her mother paused. "You don't have to worry about that right now," she said softly. "We'll take care of it." When her hair was finally loose, her mother brushed it gently, humming that same tune from Sunday night. It was the only thing that made the girl feel a little better. The warmth of her mother's hands, the sound of her voice. Outside, the night air was cool and quiet. The father stood by the window, phone in hand, looking out at the streetlights. He had already spoken to a representative from the school board, who promised to come by the next morning. He didn't plan to go alone. He turned back to look at his daughter, now asleep on the couch beside her mother. The sight broke his heart, her missing braid, her swollen eyes. He whispered quietly to himself, "No one gets to do that to my child." The next morning would not be like any other. The father had made up his mind. He would walk into that school not just as a parent, but as a man who demanded respect for his child. And he wouldn't be alone. What none of them knew yet was that by the end of that day, the small classroom incident would become something much bigger, something that would make the entire school, and even the town, stop and pay attention. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when the girl's father was already awake. He sat at the dining table with a notebook, a cup of coffee gone cold, and his phone buzzing with messages. He had spoken to a member of the school board late at night, and they promised to visit the school that morning. Still, he didn't trust promises. He wanted to be there himself. In the other room, the girl was getting ready for school, though she didn't want to go. Her eyes were still puffy from crying, and her hair was now tied in a simple ponytail. She avoided looking in the mirror. Her mother tried to help her get dressed, but the girl stood quietly, moving slowly as if her body didn't want to go through the motions. "I can stay home," her mother said gently. "You don't have to face them today." The girl looked up. "But if I don't go, she'll think—" "She won," she whispered. Her mother stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "You're braver than you think," she said softly. By the time they finished breakfast, the father was ready. He had put on his work clothes, neat shirt, pressed pants, and carried a folder filled with printed emails, the school handbook, and notes he had written down overnight. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was focused. When they arrived at the school, the parking lot was already filling with cars. The girl hesitated before stepping out. "Do I have to go inside?" she asked. Her father crouched down to meet her eyes. "You don't have to do anything that makes you feel uncomfortable," he said. "But I need to speak to them. You can stay with your mom for now." She nodded quietly. Her mother took her hand and walked her toward the nurse's office, the same place she had sat the day before. The father turned and walked toward the front office. His steps were firm, his face calm but unreadable. Inside the office, the secretary looked up, smiling nervously. "Good morning," she said. "Can I help you?" "Yes," he replied. "I'm here about my daughter. I'd like to see the principal and the teacher who cut her hair." The woman's smile faded slightly. The principal is in a meeting." That's fine," he said. "I'll wait." Before the secretary could respond, the door behind her opened and the principal stepped out. He froze when he saw the father standing there. "Oh. Good morning," the principal said quickly. "I was going to call you today." "I thought I'd save you the trouble," the father replied. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The principal gestured toward his office. "Of course. Please come in." The office was small but tidy, decorated with student art and framed certificates. The principal sat behind his desk, folding his hands together as the father took a seat opposite him. "I'm sure you're aware of what happened yesterday," the father began. The principal nodded slowly. "Yes, I spoke to the teacher after the incident." She explained that it was a misunderstanding. "She said your daughter's hairstyle was causing a distraction and she acted impulsively. It wasn't her intention to hurt anyone." The father stared at him for a moment. "She cut my child's hair with scissors," he said quietly, "in front of her classmates." "And you're calling that a misunderstanding?" The principal hesitated. "I understand how this looks." "No," the father interrupted, his voice calm but sharp. "You understand exactly what it is. You have a grown adult in your school who humiliated a child for something that should never have been an issue." The principal shifted uncomfortably. "We're looking into it," he said. "Good," the father replied. "Because the school board is looking into it too. And so is the local paper." The principal's face changed. "The school board?" he repeated. "Yes," the father said, standing. "They're on their way right now. You might want to clear your schedule." Right at that moment, the door opened again. A woman in a dark suit entered, holding a clipboard. "Good morning," she said briskly. "I'm from the district office. We're here to review the incident from yesterday." The principal stood, trying to keep his composure. "Of course," he said. "I didn't expect your team so soon." The father gave a small, humorless smile. "I did." Within minutes, the situation began to draw attention. Teachers whispered in the hallway. Students peeked from classroom doors. The teacher who had cut the girl's hair appeared at the far end of the corridor, trying to act as though nothing unusual was happening. When she saw the father standing with the board member, her face went pale. The board representative asked to speak to everyone involved, the principal, the teacher, and the father, in the conference room. The air was tense. "I'd like each of you to explain in your own words what happened," the representative said. The teacher went first. She spoke quickly, avoiding eye contact. "It was a distraction issue," she said. "The beads in her hair kept clicking and the other students were laughing. I asked her to fix it, but she didn't. I thought a quick trim would solve it. I didn't mean to upset her." The father leaned forward slightly. "A quick trim?" he said quietly. "You cut a child's braid off. That's not a trim. That's humiliation." The representative looked up from her notes. "Did you ask for permission before cutting it?" The teacher shook her head. "I didn't think it was necessary at the moment." The room went silent. Even the principal looked uncomfortable. The father took a breath before speaking again. "Do you have any idea what that hair meant to her? Her mother spent hours braiding it. It's part of who she is, and you decided on your own that it didn't belong in your classroom." The teacher's voice faltered. I just wanted her to focus." The father's expression hardened. "She was focused until you embarrassed her in front of everyone." The representative scribbled notes quickly, her pen moving across the page. "I'll be requesting the security footage," she said. "And we'll need statements from the students as well." The teacher looked panicked. Is that necessary? It's absolutely necessary, the representative replied firmly. After the meeting, word began to spread around the school. Students started whispering that the teacher might lose her job. Some of them even talked about what they saw. One girl told the board member, "She just took the scissors and cut it." Everyone went quiet, others nodded. A few said they recorded part of it on their phones. The situation was no longer a rumor. It was evidence. Meanwhile, the girl sat in the nurse's office again, unaware of everything happening outside. She was quietly drawing in her notebook, trying to distract herself. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand. "It's going to be okay," her mother said softly. "Your dad's talking to the right people." The girl looked up. "Will she say sorry?" Her mother hesitated, then sighed. "I don't know, but you will get your dignity back, I promise." By noon, several people from the district had arrived. The principal's phone kept ringing. The teacher was asked to step out of her classroom and leave for the day. Some parents started showing up too, parents who had heard from their kids what had happened. One of them, a mother of a boy in the same class, approached the father in the hallway. "I saw your daughter yesterday," she said softly. "My son came home upset. He said it wasn't right. I just want you to know we're with you." The father thanked her quietly. Word of support started spreading. Other parents emailed the school board demanding accountability. That afternoon, when the final bell rang, the father walked his daughter out of the building. Reporters had already started gathering near the gate, asking questions. He didn't stop to talk. He just placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder and kept walking. Once they were home, the house felt different. There was a mix of relief and exhaustion. The girl sat on the couch, watching cartoons without really paying attention. Her father stood near the kitchen counter on another phone call. "Yes," he said. "I spoke to the representative. They're reviewing footage today. And yes, I'll provide a written statement." He hung up and looked at his wife. "They're taking it seriously," he said. She nodded. "Good. They should." Later that evening, their living room lights were low. The father sat beside his daughter, watching her draw again. She was sketching herself, holding hands with her parents. He noticed that in her drawing, her hair was whole again, with all the braids intact. He smiled faintly. "That's a beautiful picture," he said. She looked up. "I just wanted to remember it like before." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You will," he said quietly. "This won't define you." That night, as she went to bed, she asked softly, "Will I have to go back there tomorrow?" Her father paused. "We'll see what the board says," he replied. "But no one will ever touch your hair again. I promise." He turned off the light and sat by her bed until she fell asleep. Then he walked to the kitchen, pulled out his notebook again, and began writing everything down. Every call, every promise, every detail. He didn't want anything forgotten. Outside, the street was quiet, but inside that small home, something powerful had shifted. It wasn't just about one braid anymore. It was about standing up for respect, for dignity, for every child who had ever been made to feel less than they are. The next morning, the school board's car would pull into the school parking lot again, and this time, they wouldn't just be reviewing paperwork, they would be demanding answers. The teacher might not have realized it yet, but her actions had awakened something far larger than she expected. And for the first time in a long while, the girl's father felt a sense of calm, not because things were over, but because justice had finally started to move. The next morning started quietly, but everyone in town seemed to know something was about to happen. News about the incident had spread fast. Some parents had shared it on social media, and now people were talking, not only about what had happened, but about how the school had handled it. Inside the small house, the girl sat at the table eating cereal without much appetite. Her father was dressed and ready long before she finished breakfast. His shirt was neatly tucked in, and he carried the same folder he'd been updating the night before. The morning light fell across his face, showing both determination and fatigue. Her mother was packing the girl's bag, slipping in her lunchbox. "You don't have to stay all day," she said softly. "Just see how you feel. If anything bothers you, tell the nurse or call me." The girl nodded quietly. She still didn't want to go back, but there was a new calmness in her eyes, maybe from knowing she wasn't alone anymore. The father drove them to school. The car was silent except for the soft hum of the engine. As they turned onto the main road, they could already see two unfamiliar cars parked near the school gate. One of them had the district's emblem on the door. The father parked the car and turned to his daughter. "Remember," he said gently, "none of this was your fault. You hold your head high, all right?" She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." Her mother took her hand, walking her toward the entrance. The father stayed back, waiting for the people from the school board to arrive. A few parents were standing near the gate, whispering quietly to each other. When they saw him, some nodded respectfully, others simply watched. A woman in a navy blazer approached, the same school board representative from the day before. She looked professional but kind. "Good morning," she said. "I spoke to the district superintendent last night. We're proceeding with the review today." The father shook her hand. "Thank you for coming back." "We're doing the right thing," she said. "No child should ever go through what your daughter did." By 8 o'clock, the atmosphere inside the school was tense. Teachers spoke in hushed tones in the hallway. Some avoided eye contact. Students noticed the change too. Even the morning announcement seemed quieter than usual. In the office, the principal was trying to keep calm, but his hands fidgeted as he rearranged papers on his desk. He had been told that members of the board would be reviewing not just this incident, but also how the administration had responded. He didn't like that idea one bit. The father entered the office with the board representative, his expression steady. "I want to see the footage," he said simply. The principal hesitated. "I'm not sure if it's part of the investigation," the representative interrupted firmly. "Please bring it up." The principal sighed, turning to his computer. After a few clicks, the footage appeared, silent but clear. The classroom, the students, the teacher walking around. Then the moment. The teacher reaching for the scissors. The girl frozen in her seat. The cut, even without sound, it was painful to watch. The representative leaned forward slightly, her face tightening. The father stared at the screen, silent. When it ended, the room was still. "That," the father said quietly, "is not a misunderstanding." The representative nodded. "You're right." She turned to the principal. "Was this reported immediately?" The principal shifted in his chair. "The teacher came to me afterward. She said she'd handled it poorly but didn't think it was serious enough for suspension." The father let out a low breath. "Not serious? You think cutting a child's hair is nothing?" The representative looked directly at the principal. "Why wasn't the family called right away?" The principal had no answer. He just looked down at his desk. At that moment, a knock came at the door. The teacher entered, holding a folder. Her eyes darted nervously between the faces in the room. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. "Yes," the representative said. "Please have a seat." The teacher sat down slowly. For the first time, she looked less confident and more shaken. "We've reviewed the video," the representative continued. "Can you explain in your own words why you thought it was appropriate to cut a student's hair during class?" The teacher took a deep breath. "I was trying to manage the class. The students were distracted, and I thought if you just what?" The father interrupted softly. "Humiliate a little girl? Take away something that was part of her identity?" She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. "It wasn't meant to hurt her," she said quietly. "I made a mistake." The representative's tone remained professional. "A mistake like this isn't something we take lightly," she said. "We've already received multiple witness statements from students. They all confirm your actions." The teacher swallowed hard. "I understand." The father leaned forward slightly. "Do you?" he asked. "Because understanding means realizing the pain you caused. My daughter cried herself to sleep last night. She asked if she'd done something wrong. That's what you left her with." For a long moment, no one spoke. The teacher's face was pale. The representative finally said, "For now, you're being placed on administrative leave pending further action. We'll inform you of the outcome once the board reviews everything." The teacher nodded faintly, stood up and walked out of the office without another word. The father watched her leave, then looked back at the representative. "Thank you," he said quietly. "We're not done yet," she replied. "There will be a formal meeting later this week. You and your family will be invited to attend." As the day went on, the story spread even more. Some local reporters showed up outside the school, asking for comments. Parents gathered in small groups talking about fairness and respect. The school, once just another quiet building, had suddenly become the center of attention. The girl stayed in the nurse's office again, drawing quietly while her mother sat beside her. She didn't want to walk through the halls. Too many eyes, too many whispers. The nurse brought her a small snack and tried to make her smile, but she could tell the girl was still hurting inside. Around lunchtime, the board representative stopped by to see her. She knelt beside the girl's chair and spoke softly. "You're very brave, you know that?" The girl shrugged. "I just want to go home." "I understand," the woman said kindly. "We're making sure this never happens to anyone else again. You helped us do that." The girl looked up. "Really?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "Sometimes standing up for yourself helps more people than you realize." When school ended that day, the father walked out of the building with his daughter holding his hand. A few parents called out to him, offering support. One man said, "You did the right thing." Another woman nodded and added, "We're with you." He thanked them all, though he still looked serious. He wasn't doing this for attention. He just wanted justice and dignity for his child. At home that evening, the family sat together at the dinner table. The girl ate quietly while her father explained what had happened during the meeting. Her mother listened carefully, holding her daughter's hand. "So what happens next?" her mother asked. "The board will decide," he replied. "But they already know the truth. And the video doesn't lie." There was a long pause before the girl spoke. "Will she say sorry?" she asked softly. Her father hesitated. "Maybe one day," he said. "But what matters most is that you know it wasn't your fault." The girl nodded slowly. After dinner, the father went out for a short walk to clear his head. The air was cool and still. He looked up at the sky, half cloudy, half lit by the setting sun, and thought about everything that had happened in the last 2 days. He didn't like conflict. He wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice or looked for trouble, but when it came to his family, there was no hesitation in him. He thought about his daughter's tears, her missing braid, and the quiet strength she had shown. By the time he returned home, his mind was clear. He knew this was bigger than one classroom. It was about respect, equality, and the way children were treated, especially those who looked or spoke differently. Inside, his daughter was sitting on the floor, drawing again. This time she was sketching a picture of herself standing between her parents with a school building in the background. Everyone in the picture was smiling. He sat down beside her. "That's a nice drawing," he said gently. She looked up. "It's us," she said. "And the school is fixed now," he smiled. "I like that," he said quietly. "One day it will be." As the night settled in, the house felt peaceful for the first time in days. The storm outside their door wasn't over, but inside they had found something stronger: unity. And the father knew that when the school board meeting came, he would be ready. He wouldn't need anger or shouting. The truth itself was powerful enough. The next few days would bring more questions, more attention, and more decisions. But for now, the family rested, knowing they had already taken the first step toward justice. The father glanced at the small braid, still kept safely in a box on the shelf. It wasn't just hair anymore, it was a reminder, a symbol of what they had endured, and of the courage that began with one child refusing to be silent. He whispered softly to himself before turning off the light. "She'll never be humiliated again. Not my daughter." And somewhere deep inside, he believed that the world was already starting to change, one small voice at a time. The next few days felt like a storm that wouldn't end. The small school, which had always been a quiet place, suddenly turned into a center of attention. News vans parked across the street, reporters stood near the gates, and parents gathered outside whispering and pointing. Everyone wanted to know how something like this could have happened inside a classroom. Inside the building, the mood was heavy. Some teachers avoided eye contact while others looked guilty, even if they hadn't done anything wrong. The students talked in low voices, sharing stories about what they had seen. Everyone had an opinion, but the truth was already clear. The teacher had crossed a line and no one could deny it anymore. The school board had officially opened an investigation. A team of officials arrived early that week, walking around with clipboards and files. They spoke with the staff, the students, and anyone connected to the incident. The atmosphere was tense, and even those who had tried to stay quiet before now felt the pressure to speak honestly. In the small house at the end of Maple Street, the girl sat in her room with her father by her side. Her hair was unbraided now, and she still looked at the mirror every morning, remembering that awful moment. Her father noticed her silence and tried to lift her spirit with gentle words. He told her how proud he was of her strength and how brave she had been to tell the truth, even when it hurt. She smiled faintly but still carried the sadness in her eyes. At night, the father couldn't sleep. He replayed that day over and over again. He thought about how his daughter must have felt, sitting in front of everyone, humiliated and scared. It broke his heart, but he knew he couldn't let anger control him. What his daughter needed most right now was peace and protection, not rage. So instead of shouting, he worked quietly and carefully. He called the people he needed to call, kept every document, and spoke with the school board every single day until he saw progress. The teacher, meanwhile, was placed on leave. Her classroom was closed, her nameplate removed from the door. Some parents were furious at her, while others simply avoided talking about it, hoping the problem would disappear. But it didn't. The community was watching. Social media carried the story far beyond the town, and messages of support poured in for the young girl. People from different states sent kind words, telling her to stay strong and hold her head high. Even children from other schools wrote letters and drawings for her, reminding her that she wasn't alone. One morning, when the father went to drop off his daughter at school, a group of parents came forward to shake his hand. Some had tears in their eyes. They told him how brave he was for standing up for his child. A mother said softly, "You're not just helping your daughter. You're helping all our kids." That moment stayed with him. He realized this fight wasn't just about one child. It was about respect, fairness, and dignity for every student. The investigation continued. The school board reviewed security footage, student statements, and staff reports. Everything pointed to the same truth. The teacher's behavior was unacceptable. She had acted in anger and caused real harm. The footage clearly showed the classroom's silence, the girls' tears, and the shock on the students' faces. There was no way to twist it anymore. When the father was called in to meet the board, he felt nervous but calm. He brought his daughter with him, not because she had to be there, but because he wanted her to see what standing up for oneself looked like. As they walked down the long hallway of the district office, people turned to look at them. Some smiled in support. The father held his daughter's hand tightly. The meeting lasted for hours. The board members asked questions, reviewed the footage again, and discussed the policies that had been broken. The father listened quietly, then spoke when it was his turn. He didn't shout. His voice was steady, full of emotion but controlled. He told them about his daughter, how much she loved learning, how excited she used to be for school, and how that one day had changed her. He said he didn't want revenge. He just wanted justice and for no other child to go through the same pain. After the meeting, the father and daughter went home, both exhausted. They didn't know what the decision would be yet, but they had done everything they could. That night, they sat in the living room, eating dinner together. It was quiet, but it felt different now, lighter somehow. The father looked across the table at his daughter, who was slowly regaining her smile. He said softly, "No matter what happens next, you remember this, you stood tall. You didn't let anyone take away your worth." The next few days brought more change. The community organized a meeting at the local town hall. Parents, students, and even teachers gathered to talk about what had happened. It was the first time many of them had spoken openly about issues like respect, fairness, and cultural understanding. The girl's story became a symbol of something bigger, a reminder of how important it was to treat every child with dignity. At the meeting, one of the older teachers spoke up. She said she had been teaching for over 20 years and had seen children treated unfairly for small things that should never have mattered. Her voice shook as she admitted that too often people stayed silent. "But not this time," she said. "This time we will do better." The room filled with applause. The father watched quietly, feeling both proud and emotional. He knew change was beginning. The investigation report was almost ready by then. The board promised to make the findings public once everything was reviewed. Rumors spread that the teacher would face serious consequences, possibly losing her job permanently. But the father didn't want to celebrate yet. He waited for the official decision, knowing that closure would come only when everything was clear. During that time, the girl began returning to her normal routine. She started smiling more, talking with her friends, and even helping her younger brother with homework again. Her teachers treated her with extra care, always checking in to make sure she felt safe and comfortable. The counselor met with her once a week, and each time she seemed a little stronger. The father also noticed small signs of healing. One evening, he found his daughter sitting at the kitchen table, brushing her hair gently in front of a mirror. It was the first time she had done that since the incident. He stood quietly for a moment, watching her. When she noticed him, she smiled and said, "I think I want to get my braids done again soon." His heart warmed. That simple sentence meant more than anything. It meant she was ready to reclaim what had been taken from her. The following morning, the school board sent out an official letter. A meeting would be held at the end of the week to announce the outcome. Everyone in town seemed to know about it. Reporters waited outside the building, cameras ready as the day arrived. Parents gathered in the hall, whispering anxiously. The father and daughter sat together in the front row, their hands intertwined. Before the board entered, the father looked down at his daughter and whispered, "No matter what they say today, you've already won." She nodded and leaned her head against his arm. When the board members finally came in, the room went silent. Papers rustled, a microphone clicked, and one of the officials began reading the findings. The report described everything clearly and honestly: the teacher's actions, the student witnesses, and the emotional harm caused. It stated that the teacher had violated both ethical and professional standards, and that the school had failed to protect a student under its care. The board apologized publicly to the family and promised immediate action to ensure such an event would never happen again. The teacher's employment was suspended pending termination, and new training programs were introduced for all staff to understand cultural respect and student rights. The principal also received a warning for trying to minimize the situation earlier on. The father listened quietly as the words sank in. It wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about accountability. After the meeting ended, people came up to the father and his daughter, offering handshakes and hugs. Some parents thanked them for speaking up, saying that their courage had opened everyone's eyes. The girl smiled shyly, holding her father's hand as they walked out into the sunlight. Reporters called out their names, but they didn't stop. They didn't need to say anything more. The truth was already known. That evening, the father sat on the porch watching the sunset. His daughter joined him, sitting beside him silently for a while. Finally, she said, "Dad, it's over, right?" He looked at her and nodded. "Yes," he said softly, "it's over. And you're stronger than ever." The story spread far beyond their town, reaching people across the country. But for them, the most important thing wasn't the headlines or attention. It was the peace that finally returned to their home. The father knew there were still challenges ahead, but he also knew one thing for sure: his daughter would never again be made to feel small for who she was. As the stars appeared in the night sky, he whispered a quiet promise to himself, to always stand by her side no matter what life brought next. And for the first time in a long while, they both felt free. Weeks passed, and slowly life began to return to something that looked like normal. The noise around the story started to fade, but its impact remained. The small school that had once been known for quiet hallways now carried a new kind of energy. People spoke more softly to one another, listened a little better, and treated every student with a kind of gentleness that hadn't been there before. The girl returned to school one bright morning, her hair beautifully braided again. Her father stood beside her at the front door, helping her carry her backpack. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes full of pride. "You ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, smiling in a way she hadn't for a long time. "I'm ready," she said, and walked inside. As she stepped into her classroom, the students turned to look at her. For a second, she felt nervous, like all eyes were still on her. But then she noticed something different. Her classmates smiled, some even clapped softly, and one of her friends whispered, "You look amazing." The tension that had once filled the room was gone. Instead, it felt warm, almost peaceful. The new teacher welcomed her with kindness. She didn't mention the past, but her tone was gentle and her eyes kind. She said, "We're all very happy to have you here." It was a small sentence, but it meant everything. The girl took her seat near the window and felt a sense of comfort she hadn't felt in months. At home, her father noticed how her laughter returned slowly. She started helping him cook again, singing quietly while chopping vegetables or setting the table. Sometimes he would find her writing in her notebook, her face calm and thoughtful. When he asked what she was working on, she would smile and say, Just something I want to remember later. One afternoon, the school board sent an official letter to their home. It thanked the family for their patience and courage, confirming that the teacher had been permanently dismissed. The letter also listed new programs that would be introduced: cultural understanding sessions for all staff, open discussion meetings for parents, and a dedicated office for student safety concerns. The father read every word carefully, feeling both relief and pride. He placed the letter in a small wooden box, the same one where he kept family photos and important memories. Later that week, the school held an assembly. The principal, who had remained quiet for most of the ordeal, stood on stage and spoke to all the students. His voice was steady, but there was humility in his tone. He admitted that the school had failed one of its own, and that changes were already happening. He promised that every student, no matter their background, would be treated with respect and care. The students listened silently, some nodding, some whispering to one another. It was a moment of reflection, not celebration, a quiet acknowledgement that something wrong had finally been made right. After the assembly, the girl walked down the hall, and several students approached her. They thanked her for being brave. One of them said, "Because of you, they're finally listening." She smiled, still shy, but this time her smile reached her eyes. She didn't see herself as brave. She just did what she felt was right. But seeing others inspired by her made her realize how powerful standing up for yourself could be. Her father was invited to speak at a community meeting a few days later. At first, he didn't want to. He wasn't used to being in front of a crowd, and he didn't like attention. But his daughter encouraged him. "You should go," she said softly. "Tell them what you told me, that we don't need to shout to be heard." That evening, he stood in front of a small crowd at the local community center. Parents, teachers, and board members filled the room. He took a deep breath before speaking. His words were simple and honest. He talked about love, respect, and the importance of listening to children. He said that what happened wasn't just about one bad decision. It was about how people sometimes forget that every child carries their pride, their history, and their worth in ways we must protect. When he finished, the room stayed quiet for a moment, then filled with gentle applause. Several parents came up afterward, thanking him, some with tears in their eyes. One mother said, "You reminded us what being a parent really means." That night, as he walked home, the air felt lighter, the stars brighter. He felt something he hadn't felt in a while: peace. Meanwhile, the girl found herself growing stronger each day. She began writing for the school newsletter, telling small stories about kindness and friendship. Her words touched many hearts. Even teachers began quoting her lines in class. Her writing wasn't about what happened to her. It was about how people could choose compassion over cruelty, understanding over judgment. Months later, the school year came to an end. On the last day, the girl received a small award for courage and leadership. She didn't expect it. When her name was called, she froze for a moment before standing up. The whole auditorium clapped, and she walked to the stage with quiet grace. The principal handed her the certificate and whispered, "Thank you for teaching us something we should never forget." When she came home that day, she showed the award to her father. He didn't say much, he just hugged her tightly. After a while, he said, "This is more than just a paper. It's proof that good people still exist and good things can come from pain." She nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. That weekend, her mother braided her hair again. They sat together in the living room, sunlight falling softly across the floor. The father watched from the doorway, smiling as the two talked and laughed. It was such a simple moment, but it held so much meaning. The braids that once symbolized pain now stood as a sign of strength. Each twist, each strand was a reminder that no one could take away her pride ever again. Life didn't become perfect overnight. There were still moments when memories would return, small flashes of that day that made her heart tighten, but with time those memories lost their power. What replaced them was confidence, an inner calm that couldn't be shaken. She began to speak up more in class, make new friends, and take part in school events. Her laughter filled the hallways again, and everyone who saw her could tell she had found her light once more. As for her father, he continued to work quietly behind the scenes, joining committees, volunteering at school events, and making sure other parents felt supported. People respected him deeply now. They knew he wasn't just a man who fought for his daughter. He was someone who believed in fairness for everyone. One day, a teacher stopped him after a school meeting and said, "You know, your daughter changed this place." He smiled and replied, "She changed me too." Time passed. The story that once shocked the town became a lesson everyone carried in their hearts. Teachers told it to new staff members not as gossip but as a reminder. Students who were younger at the time grew up hearing how one girl's courage led to change. It became a quiet part of the school's history, something that made people pause and think before speaking, before judging, before acting in anger. Years later, when the girl was older, she wrote an essay for a college application. The topic was a moment that changed your life. She didn't write about pain. She wrote about forgiveness, growth, and how one experience taught her to never let anyone define her worth. Her essay ended with a simple line: "What hurt me once shaped me forever, but it didn't break me." When she got her acceptance letter months later, her father found her sitting on the porch, tears in her eyes but a smile on her face. He asked what was wrong and she just handed him the letter. He read it, then looked at her with pure pride. "I knew you'd make it," he said quietly. She leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." He smiled. "You never gave up on yourself either." That night as they ate dinner, laughter filled their home once again. The TV played softly in the background, the sound of life returning to normal. The father looked across the table at his daughter, now strong, confident, and full of hope. He realized that this journey had taught him something powerful, that love and patience could heal wounds no punishment ever could. As the day ended, he walked into her room to say goodnight. She was sitting by the window, writing again in her notebook. "What are you writing now?" he asked. She smiled and said, "A story about us, about how we got through everything." He chuckled softly. "That's a story worth telling." She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "It's already written, Dad," she said, "in the way we live now." He turned off the light, kissed her forehead, and closed the door gently. Outside, the night was calm, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. The pain that had once divided a classroom had brought together an entire community. A father's courage, a daughter's strength, and a lesson in respect had changed countless lives. And somewhere, in the quiet of their home, a young girl with braided hair slept peacefully, knowing she had turned her hurt into hope, and that her story had helped the world grow a little kinder.